Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Investing in the stock market is a powerful thing. It is pretty much the easiest, most accessible way for anyone to get started investing. You can get started with just a few dollars and you can get started in just a couple minutes time. It is the easiest way to build long-term wealth, and without investing, you're unlikely to ever achieve financial freedom. If you're not investing, you're likely going to get stuck in that cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. Investing is the long-term solution to escaping the rat race. It's the way to create a life you love, because really that's the whole point of money, to use it as a tool, create the life you love. So I ran across this article titled 9 Charts Showing You Why You Should Invest Today. And I thought these charts did a pretty good job of explaining why investing is so important. And I think everyone has a different moment where they see a chart or they read something and the power of investing just clicks. For me, it happened in my teenage years when I was reading an article about Warren Buffett, and he said for every dollar he invested, he imagined that he'd be able to turn it into $100 in the future. And that was the key phrase. That phrase literally changed my life. That made it so I wanted to invest aggressively and made it so I was very careful with my spending. Because anytime I went to spend money, say there was an item that was $10, I would think to myself, this item isn't really just costing me $10, it's costing me 1,000 future dollars. And thinking in terms like that made it very hard to part with that $10 today. It made it much more likely that I was going to invest that money. So my hope is that these charts can help to inspire someone to think with that kind of mentality, to pause and say, well, maybe these dollars could be better directed towards investing. Maybe these dollars could help me build a better future. Important to know before we dive into these tables that each of these tables assumes a 7% annual rate of return, assuming a stock market return of 9% and discounting that by 2% as a long-term inflation rate. The first chart shows that by simply investing an incredibly small amount, just $5 a day, over the course of 50 years, that could grow to over $800,000. And you've probably heard of this referred to as the latte factor, popularized by the financial expert David Bach, where he suggested rather than spending $5 a day on, say, your favorite latte or whatever frivolous $5 expense you have, you could instead invest that money. You could have enough to retire. $5 a day is an incredibly reasonable sum. With $5 a day, we're just talking about $35 a week. And I know we live in a time where roughly 60% of people say they're living paycheck to paycheck, including a high percentage of six-figure earners. But I think if people were really honest with themselves and really looked at their expenses, they could find $35 a week to invest. And by letting this $35 a week stay invested over the course of an entire working career, you would end up in a far better position than the average American. The average American at retirement age doesn't have anywhere near what this $5 a day could grow to if consistently invested year in and year out. Yes, it's a very small amount, but if invested consistently, it could turn into a very substantial sum. So this next chart is the exact same premise as the first one, but rather than investing $5 a day, in this situation, it's investing $15 a day. But look at what it can grow to. $15 a day or $105 a week invested for 40 years can grow to over $1 million. If left invested for 50 years, it could grow to over $2.5 million. $15 a day to $2.5 million. Let that sink in. And maybe you don't have a 50-year investing career. Maybe you think a 40-year investing career is more realistic leading up to retirement. But in that case, it's still over $1 million. If you're investing $15 a day, that's $5,475 for the year. The median household income in the US is $74,580, and the median individual income is $40,480. Now, depending on your circumstances, getting to this savings rate might be a bit of a stretch, but if you have a household income that's on par with the median, that puts you at a savings rate of about 7%. If you're an individual income earner, that would put you at a savings rate of about 14%. And generally speaking, financial professionals tend to recommend that you save anywhere from 15 to 20% of your income towards long-term savings goals. So that does put you actually below this threshold. And that's prior to capturing any employer match that you might have on your retirement accounts. And that absolutely does count towards your savings percentage. Oftentimes, we don't even give it a second thought when we spend $15. That could be a lunch out. Maybe it's an item we buy as we're scrolling through social media, or maybe it's just an extra $15 worth of groceries that we put in our cart that eventually just gets tossed out because we bought too much food and it doesn't get eaten. I want you to see this chart and maybe ask yourself, is there a way I could better direct this $15 towards investments? This next table shows the power of getting invested early. In the situation, each investor begins by investing $200 a month. Investor 1 starts at the age of 25 and his portfolio grows to over $500,000. Investor 2 starts at age 35. Her portfolio grows to about $250,000. And Investor 3 starts at age 45. His portfolio grows to about $100,000. The first investor invested a total of $96,000. The second investor invested a total of $72,000, and the third investor, $48,000. That third investor put in half the amount of the first investor, but ended up with a portfolio less than a fifth the size. This is why compounding is so magical. It doesn't grow things in a linear fashion. It grows them in an exponential fashion. But for it to work its magic, you need to give it a really long runway. In the beginning, it's you doing a lot of the legwork. But after a couple decades, you really start to notice that snowball taking over. So whatever age you are, now is the best age to get investing. And one thing to note here, if each of those 3 investors wanted to end up with that over $500,000 sum, and they started investing at the age of 25 or 35 or 45, here's the amounts they would have to invest in order to get there. The longer you delay, the harder it's going to be to reach these financial goals because the more you have to save. In this situation, we have an investor who contributes $200 a month every year for 10 years from age 25 to 35. Then he simply stops all contributions and simply lets the investments grow until the age of 65. Alternatively, we have an investor who starts at the age of 35, invests $200 a month every single month all the way up until the age of 65. In this situation, the original investor still comes out ahead. Again, this speaks to the power of being invested for the long term. That first investor invests considerably less money and only invested for 10 years, whereas the second investor invested for a total of 30 years, and that first investor still comes out ahead. This is the power of now. This is the power of getting invested right away. If you're in your 20s, get invested now. If you're a parent and you have a child who's in their teenage years and maybe they have their first job, or you have a young 20-something, try to encourage them to get started investing right away. Even if it's just small amounts, maybe it's $50 here and there, maybe it's $100 here or there. Time is the most important asset you have when it comes to compounding. You can never get that time back. This next table illustrates a fun moment in investing. When your investments start to return more on an annual basis, then you're actually contributing. And make no mistake about it, for most of us investors, it takes a long time to get to this point. If you look at this chart, it happens near year 10 or 11 in this situation. But when you start to see that your portfolio is growing by more in a single year than you're actually contributing to it, that's when investors really start to get excited. When your portfolio starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger on its own, that's when you really notice this snowball effect happening. And I talk about this in a video where I talk about the first $100,000 being the hardest. It's a concept where when you're starting out, it's you doing a lot of the legwork. You're not really feeling the effects of compounding yet. But once your portfolio hits a certain threshold, then you start to notice compounding really taking off. Your portfolio hits a point where you're actually making more in returns than you're actually contributing to it. And that's when things get exciting. Again, this next one is a similar concept. It's your portfolio growing by more than the contributions. But this time, it's not your portfolio growing by more than what you've contributed on an annual basis. It's your portfolio growing by more than you've ever contributed. It's that tipping point when your portfolio becomes a greater percentage of returns and interest than you've ever put in. And if you're a long-term investor looking at, say, a 45-year investment horizon, by the time you hit year 45, only a very small percentage of your portfolio would actually come from your contributions. The vast majority of your portfolio truly does come from compounding. In the example here, with someone starting at the age of 25 and investing $200 a month for 50 years, the portfolio grows to about $1.1 million, of which they've only contributed roughly $120,000. The remainder is all from compounding. Remember, when it comes to investing, the more you can invest, invest, the more it can grow to. If you can find a way to double your investment today, you can double what it can grow to. If you can invest $500 a month over 45 years, that can grow to about $2 million. But if you can find a way to invest $1,000 a month over 45 years, that can grow to about $4 million. In the first example, contributing $500 a month, you would have contributed roughly $270,000. The remaining $1.6 million would have come from compound growth. By contributing $1,000 a month, you would have contributed roughly $541,000. The remaining $3 million would have come from compounding. Making small sacrifices today, allowing yourself to invest a little bit more today, can pay off big down the road. And this final graph shows the power of increasing your contributions over time. The yellow line shows an investor who contributes a strict $200 a month every single month for their entire working career. The blue line shows someone who starts off by contributing $200 a month, but then each year increases their investing contributions by 5%. The first investor ends up with a little bit over $500,000. The second investor ends up with over $1 million. When you're just getting started out in your career, you're very likely starting out with a lower starting salary, which means your savings rate may be inherently lower. As you work through your career and capture some pay raises, you should be able to increase the amount that you're saving, whether that's the percentage or simply the dollar amount. And I certainly hope that by the time you reach 40 and say your income has doubled what it previously started at say the age of 20, that you're not saving the same dollar amount you did when you started out. But I do think we need to take this one with a little bit of grace, because you're unlikely to have a one set savings rate throughout your entire working career. Life circumstances are probably going to make it so that your savings rate will ebb and flow with time. Sometimes you'll save a little bit more, and then other times when life's more expensive, you'll probably save a little bit less. But I do hope when you step back and take a more cumulative view that you see in the long term that you are saving more as your career goes on than you did at the start of your career. So what table do you think is the most impactful? What do you think is the one that's most likely to inspire someone to get invested? For me, it's the ones that show how small amounts can grow over time and what they can grow to even if you only invest for a short period of time and then halt all contributions. And then I also really like seeing when a portfolio actually ends up making more than you've actually contributed. To me, those are very powerful. Share your favorites in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this video, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who needs a little bit of convincing on the power of compounding, consider sharing this video with them. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.